I give it a 10 out of 10.
Valid. Nothing. But you feel that coming off of him, and
Right.
I think that is what people don't consider, like, oh, I could be an actor.
This is weird because I'm having more fun watching this behind the scenes stuff than I was like actually watching the movie.
I mean, you don't even have to put artificial intelligence in something to move a box from here to here. Just tell it, move a box. The music was done by Benjamin Wallfish and Good job. They laid back, collected a check, and hit one key on the piano.
Welcome to Backseat Directing,
Where we talk about movies, TV shows, comics, and more.
we're your hosts,
Andrew
and Aaron.
We post new episodes every Monday and Thursday.
And on this episode, we're going over Blade Runner 2049.
3, 2, 1, action.
I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and on the YouTube video, they had our theme song playing.
Hold
and
on.
I was like, you guys
Hold
didn't ask
on.
permission. What is happening here? I know that song. That's my song.
Do you ever just listen to it in the car?
No, I don't. But it's good enough to.
It's a pretty hype song.
It is. All right,
right.
Andrew. Blade Runner 2049 is the topic of conversation today, which means we also had to watch Blade Runner, or at least I did, because it was I haven't seen it before. And you know how I am about old movies. It took me forever to get through that movie, man. Like 3 days, 4 days. Pause, start, pause, start. I think I fell asleep twice.
I think the movies kind of have a similarity to each other in the fact that they're both very visually stunning, but they definitely can be slow.
So the reason I really wanted to do this, or I just wanted to watch 2049. I didn't even like recommend it as like an episode topic. I was just like, hey, like I'm gonna watch it this week. If you want to do an episode on it, we can. But I really wanted to watch it just because of how it looked. Like I've never heard anyone really say like, oh, 2049 is a great movie, you know, like you have to go watch it, amazing story, whatever. Like I felt like I haven't heard a lot of hype about it before, other than, wow, it looks amazing. And I don't know, I've been on this like kick of just lighting, color grading, you know, composition, just the cinematography aspect of filmmaking. And I was like, yeah, that looks great. I want to watch it because of how it looks.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that you've had more of an interest in colors. I've seen you with your coloring book out. Mostly inside the lines, you're getting a lot better.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think I definitely appreciate the cinematography and color design of this movie as well. No, I think that, like I said, both movies can be kind of slow, and both movies can kind of lack kind of that real love from viewers that some sci-fi movies have. Like it doesn't have the following that Star Wars has or Star Trek has, but it's definitely a very unique sci-fi story, and both of them are like gorgeous movies. They're beautiful. I think there's a conversation to be had about Blade Runner 2049 definitely being the top 10 most aesthetic movies of all time.
Yeah, I could agree with that. It looked amazing, and that's kind of what kept me interested in the movie the whole time. That and Ryan Gosling. I mean, I like him. He's a stud.
We'll talk more about Roger Deakins, the cinematographer for this movie, and why he makes it so great. But I just think that it's so wild that he can do a movie. He can do anything. I mean, this is a sci-fi movie. I wouldn't always expect that from Deakins, but he can shoot. He shot multiple sci-fi films and made them look fantastic, and he can shoot in all kinds of different styles. He can shoot on film, he can shoot digital. He's just very talented, and the career he's had, like going back to the 60s, to adapt in so many ways and to do all kinds of different genres of movies, I feel like is really a credit to his name.
Definitely. All right, let's dive into the movie here, and then we'll go over the ratings, creators, and all of that. So first off, the movie summary. In the year 2049, Kay is a law enforcement officer tasked with hunting down and eliminating replicants from the Nexus 8 model. His position is known simply as Blade Runner. However, Kay is hunting down his own kind because he is a newer model, more obedient model of replicant. The latest case Kay has been working on unveils a mystery leading him to believe replicants can reproduce, and he may even be the firstborn replicant. His search for answers takes him across the environmental wasteland of Los Angeles to meet and fight all manner of people. Will he solve the mystery, or will the Wallace Corporation's newest model of use him to get the truth? The question we've all been waiting for.
Will the cooperation get to it?
Hey, look. If the movie isn't going to entertain you, we are.
Oh, all right. Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
No, I think that's an excellent description of the story plot. The movie it can be hard to follow, so it's definitely hard to condense it, I think, into like a couple sentences.
Yeah, definitely. This movie came out in 2017, rated R, 2 hours and 44 minutes long. Did it feel that long to you? It felt that long to me.
I don't think it felt 2 hours and 44 minutes long, because 3 hours is a long movie. Yeah. It didn't feel like super quick.
Yeah, I cut it into 2 days, so like I don't know, I didn't have to sit there for 3 hours straight to watch it, but it felt, if I was watching it in one sitting, I feel like I would feel the length of the movie.
It's just to me, it's the stints of the movie is where the movie will like sprint, and then it kind of does like an interval and like cuts back. And there's a specific part I remember where he is at kind of that, I don't know, industrial orphanage place, and he is going to grab the toy, the little wooden carved horse, and I was like, this is taking forever. Like, just reach out and grab it. Like, there's like a minute and a half.
You're a machine that doesn't have emotion.
Just pick it up, man. But I remember that stretch, like just him like kneeling down, opening the grate, dusting it off. It didn't need to be that long.
It kind of reminds me of Avatar: Way of Water, where they have like a 5-minute cut scene of them just swimming to the next spot. You know, just basically just showing off how good their VFX are. And this, I think, is just showing off how good the cinematography is. You know, like,
yeah, I can like the cinematography of different points of this movie is like a painting or like a beautiful photograph at any point. And it's just not, to me, like, I get bored of it quicker than watching them swim in Avatar 2, whereas right. I feel like it's just more dynamic, colorful, and it's like exciting, as opposed to watching him kneel down and pick something up. They're making it more interesting with the cinematography, but it's, hey, at the end of the day, it's still a guy picking something up.
Yeah. IMDb has an 8 out of 10, which kind of felt kind of high to me. But then Rotten Tomatoes had it at 88%, and then the audience score at 82. So overall, a very well received movie, which kind of surprises me more, like how little I've actually heard of this movie. You know, of people giving praise to this movie outside of how visually stunning it was.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that...
Are the visuals just carrying this movie?
I mean, I do think that the action, when the action hits, is very strong. I think the performances are very good. I mean, it's probably like the visuals is like Atlas holding the movie up for you to see everything else. But I do think that there's a lot of other strong qualities to the movie. I mean, the story, I would probably give a lower score than a lot of the other aspects, but it's still an interesting story when you like peel back the layers. Yeah, it's just harder to follow sometimes, so you can't necessarily get the beauty of the story on the surface.
Something interesting that came up when we were talking, and something very apparent, very obvious, when we were talking about this topic before we started recording, we mentioned how big of a difference it is from the first movie to the second movie in terms of how much time it took for this movie to actually be made. The first one came out in 1982, so 35 years later, and it still has, like you said, the main character in the sequel played by the same actor, Harrison Ford. Can you think of other sequels that have aired that far after its first one?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is Top Gun Maverick. The time difference might not be quite so severe.
Let's see.
I think it's fairly close, but Tom Cruise to come back, and in this case,
86 to 2012. 22.
Yeah, so 14 plus 22 is like 36 years or something like that.
So
and
beats it by a year.
For him to come back, still star, still have six-pack abs, still be a stud. I mean, he has a more prominent role. He's still the main character of the movie as opposed to Harrison Ford as a supporting role. So very impressive. And then I think there's a couple other movies that do it. I mean, the stars of the original Jurassic Park come back for the third Jurassic World movie. You know, decades departed from that movie.
The first one was also rated R, 1 hour and 57 minutes long, and boy, did I feel that length. And that was only 2 hours. But that one had a better rating on IMDb of an 8.1 out of 10. So
yeah, I mean, barely.
Yeah.
I mean, still, it's recognizable. It's 0.1. It's not easy to earn on IMDb, but I think that I was kind of surprised.
A win's a win, baby.
I was kind of surprised in the opposite direction of you, thinking that an 8.0 was lower than I expected. Not because I necessarily would have given it like a 9, but because I feel like the film community, like the niche group of like heavy lovers of film, have like a lot of respect for this movie.
Yeah. You want to get into our ratings?
Yeah, let's do it. We talked about it right before this started, and then I forgot to do it, so I've been doing it while we've been talking for the last 2 minutes.
Oh, snap. Okay, do you want me to go first then?
Yeah,
give you some time.
Yeah, give me some time to do this addition here.
All right, so for our rating, we break it down into 6 categories. The first category we have is story. So I gave this a 6 out of 10. Then the next category we have acting. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Cinematography, I give it a 10 out of 10.
Valid.
I don't know. I don't like giving 10s out of 10s because I feel like it's impossible to achieve the best ever possible, you know?
Yeah, well,
But like, I feel like if anything's deserving, this is.
So to give a sneak peek at my list, I also gave it a 10 out of 10. But I feel like what a 10 out of 10 means to me is like, that is the gold standard. And when I give another thing like a 6 or a 7, it's like, okay, it's a 6 or 7 because it's not as good as this.
Yeah.
And I feel like this movie hits that mark.
Yeah. Sound design is our next category. I gave it a 7 out of 10. I enjoyed the sound design, but it's kind of just the whole time.
Although
it's so cool though.
Like, it's a kind of a similar thing that I said about All Quiet on the Western Front, is like, it's simplistic, but it cuts through you. And like it's visceral. You feel it.
Yeah. So I feel like a 7, to me, a 7 and 8 is like a good score. You know,
that's an excellent score.
Yeah.
I think.
And then anything lower than that is like, you know. But see, you say right now a 7 and 8 is a good score, but then when I rank a movie and it comes out to be a 7 or 8, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so low.
Well, because like we're talking about when we rate my favorite movies of all time, they're not just excellent.
Yeah,
they're what I consider near perfect.
These next 2 categories were out of 5. We have set and character design. I gave a 4 out of 5. I mean, it just all looked visually pleasing. Every character was wearing something different, and how they kept it all like analog and stuff. Like, they were talking about how the creators were talking about how like they're stuck kind of in the 80s. Like, there's no Steve Jobs. Like, the iPhone never came out. There's not like touch screens and stuff. So like I just thought that was like a really cool detail. So I gave it a 4 out of 5. And then rewatchability, I gave it a 1.5 out of 5. And the reason is because of the story just didn't like, I didn't get encapsulated in the story. You know, I got encapsulated in with how everything looked. So for me, I'm probably not going to rewatch this again. If anything, I'll watch clips from it again just to like look at the visuals, but maybe not the entire movie again. So that brings me to a score of 7.3 out of 10.
Our ratings aren't altogether wholly different, but I definitely enjoyed the movie more than you, and I feel like that's reflected fairly in my ratings. So for story, I gave it a 7 out of 10, whereas I believe you gave it a 6. For acting, I gave it an 8 out of 10, which I believe you gave it a 7 or 8.
Gave it 8.
So yeah, we matched up for acting and cinematography as well, where I also gave it a 10 out of 10. Sound design, I gave it 7.5 out of 10.
Okay, so just a
slightly
little
higher than you, yeah. So the same reasons. I feel like that it's simplistic, but it's like very eerie. Like, the whole movie is eerie, and so
it's still very
touch
cool
on that in the sound, yeah. And then for set and character design, I gave it a 4 out of 5 as well. I love the costuming. I mean, Kay's outfit I think looks so great. I like his coat.
I want his coat.
It's like simplistic, but
I live
also
in Florida,
like
but I want it.
it's pimping, but it's also very understated and simple at the same time. They pulled it off. All their outfits are great. The futuristic looks. I like Ana de Armas's outfit when she's the giant hologram,
not wearing any clothes. This guy.
Rewatchability. I gave it a 3 out of 5.
Okay,
which
fair.
I mean, you always say how many times would somebody ask? If somebody asked you 5 times, how many times you watch it? I would say maybe 2.5 at the lowest, but I'm saying around 3. I've only seen this movie twice in my lifetime, but I really enjoyed watching it visually. Like we said, like the visuals really put the whole movie on its back, and even though there's some parts where I feel like the story lags, I like looking at it. Like it's beautiful to look at.
Budget for this movie was $150 million, and the box office brought in $267 million. So they did not double, which I don't think is necessary, but I feel like it's a little lower than I was expecting it to be.
Well, especially being like a franchise movie, they were counting on having an established fan base. Right. So I think they probably expected more producers.
Yeah. Okay. That brings us to the creators, the actors, like who made this movie.
This is where we talk about who's in front of and behind the camera. We got to start with I would argue, most important person on set, the director. That is Denis Villeneuve. And yes, his name is pronounced Denis. I may have been part of the camp that once thought it was Dennis, but
it says Dennis right there. I don't know.
It's spelled Dennis. But he directs one of our favorite movies, Prisoners, that we've done an episode on before. Go back and check that one out. He also directs Dune, Sicario, and Enemy. He's also directed Arrival. He's big in sci-fi movies now, obviously, with Dune, Arrival, and Blade Runner making up some of the biggest sci-fi movies in the last 10-15 years. And he's stunning with visuals. He's a great director. I think he's French, I believe, and originally, before some of these bigger movies, directed some European films. The cinematographer who has worked with Denis a few times and was collaborating with him on this film was Roger Deakins. We already touched on him, so I don't really need to sing his praises. It's one of the best in the industry. He did cinematography for Prisoners, Skyfall, 1917, Sicario, and then, just casually some of the most visually stunning and most recognized movies of all time, Big Lebowski and Shawshank Redemption, as well as a ton of others that I won't waste your time getting into.
Yeah, no big deal.
The music was done by Benjamin Wallfish and Good job. They laid back, collected a check, and hit one key on the piano. But also by Hans Zimmer, who we obviously respect, who doesn't need any other credits other than the fact that he did music for the Dark Knight trilogy. Although he has the credits, doesn't need them. Let's talk about who's in front of the camera. We've got an incredible cast. Again, I could go on and on, but let's just stick to what's most important here, and that's with Ryan Gosling playing Kay, otherwise known as Joe, Harrison Ford as Rick Deckard, reprising his role from the first Blade Runner, Ana de Armas as Joy, the love interest of Ryan Gosling, and a super complex relationship in this story that I want us to talk about, because one is a replicant and one is artificial AI. And then Sylvia Hoeks is Love, Jared Leto is Neander Wallace, and Carla Jury is Dr. Anna Stelline. So now let's touch on performances here, if you want to give that a beat. What were you impressed with? What did you notice? Was there anything that stood out to you in a good or bad way from the people we just mentioned?
I really like Ryan Gosling as an actor. He's one of my favorites. We debated putting him in our combined top 5 list. Like he was just outside the cuts.
He's a good top 10 for actors, for sure.
So I think for me, he kind of carried the movie. Like I was interested in the story as much as I was because of him. And now I can see the argument of like, oh, he was very one-dimensional in this movie. But I think it goes a little bit deeper than that, because he's playing a character that is very one-dimensional in terms of like emotion, very stoic. And he gives a very stoic performance. But underneath that, I feel like you can see in his performance that he's kind of debating with himself. You know, that there's some internal conflict going back and forth, especially because he thinks that like he might be the firstborn replicant, you know, that's never happened before. And that's taking an emotional toll on him when he's not supposed to have emotions. And I feel like I can see that through his performance, mainly like when he does let out a little bit of that emotion, like when he finds out that his memory is real and he's like, God damn it, you know, and like throws a fit like real quick, you know, but it's like
he draws himself back in.
It's a burst, but then he gathers himself quickly. So I would say Ryan Gosling was my favorite performance in the movie.
I think that you touched on a lot of really cool things with his performance in this movie, which is, I think, one of the big things when people think I could be an actor is they don't think about this kind of performance, which is loads harder. I mean, you or I have talked about acting, and it's like, yeah, we could go on stage and we could, oh, I'm so angry at you, or like display an emotion, but who talks about this? It's Bryan Cranston, who I love.
Yes.
I love Bryan Cranston.
The subtleties.
He talks about it's if you cry on screen, that's one thing, but the thing that makes the audience want to cry is when you basically have tears behind your eyes, when you're holding yourself back from crying, and whether that bursts over or not, like the emotions that we hold back are a lot harder to portray the emotions that we put forward. And I think that's the difficulty that can be lost in his performance, is like you're feeling what he's feeling, but he's showing that he's hiding it. So you definitely still take from that, like when Sapper talks to him about hunting his own kind, and oh, your model is okay with shoveling the shit for humanity, being a slave. Like you see that he's indignant, that he takes offense to that makes him emotional. But like at a first glance, his face is just nothing. But you feel that coming off of him, and I think that is what people don't consider. Like, oh, I could be an actor. Portraying that and making it the audience feel it is so much harder than I think people realize.
Yes. Also, what I think is harder than what people realize is how long your days are and how many times you're doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah. Setting up for a whole scene to do like a smirk and like an extreme close-up, and then like having to do all the acting.
I was watching a behind the scenes thing, and it was this lady like going around getting a tour of the place or whatever, and they're like, what are you working on today? And they're like, well, we're doing close-up shots in the spinner. And so that's like
the spinner's the car, by the way.
Car, right. Which I didn't know that was the name of it until I watched this behind the scenes thing. But it was like, well, that's what they're doing all day, is just getting close-ups for this one scene, like all day. Like, that's it? Like, don't you have a full scene to shoot? You know, like... and
then you just have to imagine the complexities of a major scene. Something like where you have 6 people sitting around a table capturing just a conversation, not even like a fight or something like that.
And Roger Deakins talks about not being lazy with the camera, and that he likes to kind of use prime lenses, which a prime lens just means that it has one focal length. So like 35 millimeters, and that's it. It can't zoom in, can't zoom out. And he was talking about how he doesn't like to be lazy with the camera, where he likes to move in on the person to get that tighter shot, rather than staying back and just having a zoom lens to get that shot. So that means they have to do the wide shot, cut, zoom in, or push the camera in to do the tight shot. And to move the camera is not as simply as like, hey, like, let's move it over here, you know, like they're big, heavy machines, you know, and then you have to adjust the lights a little bit, adjust the people a little bit. Like, there's a lot that goes into just one scene of a movie. And like you said, you have to perform on your best over and over day long for the same thing over and over and over again.
Sometimes giving a lot of energy, like an emotion, like the crying scenes in The Shining, or Ellie in The Last of Us. We just talked about screaming. Like, she probably had to do that a couple times to get the right take and the cuts that they wanted. And you're giving all this energy again and again. I mean, it's not easy.
Right.
But I think Roger Deakins doing that adds to why the film feels it as Harry Styles would say, makes it feel like a movie. It draws you into it.
I found this on the web for make it feel like a movie.
Excuse me, Siri.
Check it out.
But it draws you in. Don't spit your water on your computer. but it makes you feel enveloped in it because there's not all these things that make you feel the presence of the camera. It's just you're in the world because he's moving the camera forward. He's not zooming. You don't feel the, change in the amount of pixels per square inch. You don't feel the zoom. You just are in the movie when he's filming.
Yeah, it's super cool. Who stood out to you?
I would definitely have to say the dynamic, in my opinion, between Ryan Gosling and Ana de Armas. So, and this
is interesting, right?
Yeah, it's the idea of the concept of the relationship alone is interesting, and when you put them on screen together, I think they do a really phenomenal job. I mean, like we talked about, there's Ryan Gosling, this character who's not supposed to feel emotions. He's supposed to be the Nexus 9 model, the obedient, the controlled, reserved. But you get the feeling that he has real emotional connection to Joy. And, like, he's sad when she's sad and he's happy when she's happy, like you are with a real loved one. Like, to give her the gift of bringing her onto the roof. And he says to her, let's just say it's our anniversary. And she's like, is it? And he's like, let's just say it is. Like, he wants to do a kindness with her. He gets this bonus for the job of killing a retiring sapper.
Which, for someone who doesn't have emotions, he seems pretty lonely.
Yeah, right? And that's, like, I feel like kind of the plight of their species is, like, the lack of ability to connect. We got to talk about the greater themes of this movie at some point, because it's crazy, the depth and complexity of, for not being as popular as Star Wars, like we talked about, the universal nature and depth and complexity of these themes is, like, insane. It's very emotional.
It is a very interesting dynamic, and I feel like the more we're talking about it, the more I like the movie. The more I'm getting excited about it. Like, I told my wife last night when I was doing research for the movie, and I just got done watching the movie a few days ago, but I was doing research last night for the movie, looking at behind the scenes videos and stuff, and it was just fascinating, like listening to Roger Deakins talk and listening to the interviews of the different actors and stuff, like talk about how they're doing their role and stuff. I was, like, getting excited, to see how they were setting up the set, how they were putting the lights and stuff. I was like, this is awesome. And I told my wife, I was like, this is weird because I'm having more fun watching this behind the scenes stuff than I was, like, actually watching the movie.
I think the aspect of that is that this is a movie made by people who clearly love movies for people who love movies.
Yeah.
So, like, the filmmaking aspect to it definitely has, like, a special, like, twinkle to it.
Yeah.
As compared maybe to the story of the movie.
It's given me a different type of enjoyment or a different type of
appreciation.
Yeah, than, like, another, or entertainment, that's the word I was looking for, a different form of entertainment than maybe like a Marvel movie would, or even like Top Gun Maverick or Avatar Way of Water or something. Like, I feel like I'm getting the enjoyment of it from talking about it more so than I was watching it, which is different.
I think it's a movie that feels like a cinematic experience, and so it kind of pains me that I didn't watch it in theaters when it came out. I wish I could see this movie in theaters.
I was saying the same thing when I was watching. I was like, man, like, this would look awesome on a big screen, like, and that would probably impact how much we would like the movie.
It's crazy all the different factors that could change.
As we're talking about it, I'm just getting hyped up. I'm like, man, I should have given it a higher rating. But I can't. Like, the rating was right. That's right.
Now, that's why the ratings, we have the system to account for our biases.
Exactly.
But I think that relationship, we could talk about a whole podcast for that relationship, because she seems to have with her artificial intelligence, she seems to have real emotions where she really cares about him. The last thing that Joy says in the world before she's crushed and dies is, I love you. She's trying to tell him that she loves him. She's trying to, like, comfort him because he's clearly afraid for her, and the fear for her and the love he feels for her seems so real, but hidden behind the fact that he's not supposed to experience those things. It's a really complex relationship between two non-humans. That was my favorite thing about the movie, walking away from my first viewing, was that relationship. And at the time, it was my favorite performance by Ana de Armas, because I had yet to see Knives Out.
Yes. Okay. Do you want to kind of go into the mystery of this movie that we talked about in the summary, or do you kind of want to go into more like behind the scenes stuff, or maybe even our backseat directing stuff? Like, where do you want to go from here for this? He flipped the coin.
All right, so we're going to go into the story.
All right.
And we're going to cover the story plot through this investigation that Kay is going through. So it starts out with Kay. The beginning of the movie, Kay arrives at Sapper's house, and Sapper is, we come to find out, this Nexus 8 model, and whereas Kay is a Nexus 9. So this older model that they were given longer lifespans. They cut off those lifespans because they realized that replicants could develop emotions. So someone like Kay, Nexus 9, has a shorter lifespan to kind of account for that and keep them in their slave role instead of evolving.
The first generation or whatever that we saw in the first one, didn't they have a 4-year lifespan? Am I making that up?
Oh, maybe that is for the Nexus 8. Well, the Nexus 8 would have been the most recent model, so that would have been what Rachel was. And I think Rachel was created with a longer lifespan.
Okay. But the antagonist in the first one was 4 years, right?
Yeah, that was the whole plot point of that movie.
Gotcha.
I haven't seen that movie as recently. I do remember that, though.
Yeah.
That was part of the kind of thing they were trying to find out how to break that mold, right?
Right. They wanted to live
escape
longer.
their fate.
Exactly.
And that's the reason that was created at the time.
Yes.
Was to limit their lifespan. So he was a Nexus 8.
Yeah.
I believe.
I don't know. Did they talk about him having a lifespan limit?
Kay?
Yeah.
I believe I don't think they did talk about it, but it would have been.
I don't think so.
It would have. I imagine it would have folded over if they had that role for the Nexus 8. They would have had it for the Nexus 9.
Yeah. Interesting.
Imagine.
I don't know.
But so the Nexus 9 is the newer model. He's a Blade Runner going to retire a Nexus 8 in the form of Sapper, played by Dave Bautista. He gets to his house, confronts him. There's like this epic fight scene. It's kind of small in scale, but
Sapper has been alive longer than 4 years, right?
I mean, he certainly looks it.
It seemed like it, in terms of like him being on his own with that.
I feel like the Blade Runner universe is confusing.
Yes, and we'll talk about this more like in our backseat directing segment at the end.
They made Dave Bautista look older, which I feel like would have only been done to show that he had been alive for a long time,
or that the environment that he's living in is very harsh.
Yeah,
so like it affects the skin, and they're just.
And from my understanding, the Nexus 7 model was made without the superhuman strength. So then the villains of the first movie could not have been Nexus 7 models. So they must have been 8s, but we know they had a lifespan limitation. And then Sapper couldn't have been a Nexus 9 because Joe says, like, they talk about the difference between them being different models.
Right.
Joe says, like, my kind doesn't run.
Yeah.
Like, we're obedient, basically. I'm a 9, you're not. So he couldn't have been a 7, he must have been an 8. But then there's... I don't know. I don't understand why...
I'm getting more confused.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions that are popping up right now.
If anyone can answer that for us in our comments, where the lifespan limitation comes into play, who has it, who doesn't.
Yeah. That would help. That'd be, yes.
Because I just read online that Nexus 7s did not have the enhanced strength that the villain of the first movie did have.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of where the waters are getting confused for me. But don't you love that fight scene between Sapper and Kay?
Yeah, it's very minimal, but impactful, like you said.
I'm going to try to use Kay moving forward because I think it's confusing the way... Kay and Joe are the same person, but let's stick with Kay.
Yeah. His name is Kay.
His model number.
Yeah. That's what he like really goes by. But isn't it interesting how both movies open with the Blade Runner pushing or throwing or shooting someone through a wall?
Yeah.
They both open the same way.
Only in this case, they're both replicants, which is...
Yeah.
I think it's so much more entertaining, the opening action in this movie. The shot from the other side of the wall where Sapper is just beating Kay's head into it and the wall is like beveling and beveling, I think it looks so cool.
Yeah, it does. Our on-air sign is totally dying. It definitely needs new batteries. It's not even illuminated
just a
anymore.
Slight little flicker. But after he kills Sapper, there's some important lines there. We can touch on the themes here because I think this really kicks off what is in this movie. I want to hear your thoughts on it. So when Kay retires Sapper, Sapper says, "Your kind's okay with shoveling the shit for humanity," saying like basically the obedient role that K is accepted into due to his programming, basically, is to be subservient to humanity. And Sapper is more of a revolutionary. Maybe I think he comes from one of those rebellious colonies off-world that I think they have a line saying that. So the theme of the movie is basically, what is the difference? There's a line that later in the movie where Deckard's talking about the dog, and Kay says, "Is it real?" And Deckard says, "I don't know, ask him." I mean, would a artificial life form that has its own propensity for thought, would the difference matter? Does it matter? So that's like, I think, the biggest theme of this movie.
They think they're not real? Does Kay think he's not real?
Exactly. I mean, you have to assume to accept your existence. You consider yourself real. The difference, I guess, for them is between
biological.
Yeah.
Is that biological?
Yeah. Are you between are you a human or a replicant is kind of the difference. So, but again, what's the difference? I mean, physically, the replicants are the same to human in pretty much every way, except for their enhanced strength and durability. They're stronger. They're like the next evolution of humankind, but they have their own propensity for thought and clearly their own propensity for emotion and love. The only thing that they're lacking, which is what this movie touches on, is procreation, and they are created rather than born.
But they still have sex.
Yes. Strange. Why did they make them with sex organs if they didn't want them to reproduce?
Why did they make them with the desire to have sex? Just program that out.
Also, Rachel clearly has a uterus, which is like, why did you give her that if the Wallace Corporation or the Tyrell Corporation didn't want her to?
Andrew, they're using the body of a human as a model. So, like, how do you get rid of that? That's everyone's, like, favorite part.
We're creating a human with all this technology. How do we...
We can't leave out the tits. Okay, we can't. We just have to keep them. You know, we have no other option. All right.
I mean, I want to be able to look at my robots.
That's right.
What am I, abstinent? But so my question for you, I guess, is what is the difference? Do you feel there's a difference between replicants and humans, or is the difference just in being created versus being born?
It feels like that's the only difference. And this is kind of like jumping into our backseat directing segment, or at least for me, where it's like, I don't know if it's the movie or if it's me, but the story is a little bit hard to follow, which we've already kind of touched on. And I think the reason it's hard to follow is the execution of the world building. You know, there's a lot of questions that aren't really answered or touched upon, and even like simple questions that you can find the answer to just by like watching some behind the scenes stuff. And it seems like all the creators know, but it seems like they didn't deliver that to the audience within the movie very well. And if they did, I missed it. It went over my head. But this is kind of one of those things. It's like,
what's the difference?
Yeah. Why are the replicants so human-esque? You know, like, why are they not a little bit different?
I think that they played.
I feel like it was like a budget thing.
I think they part in the in the original movie.
Right, I have this sci-fi movie idea. We're gonna have robots and all this, and then the studio was like, "Hey, like, we don't have money for robots. What if they looked like humans?"
Well, I think that my interpretation of it is that they kind of prioritize themes over sense. Like I think the biggest theme of the movie is that question, that what's the difference, is that essentially what makes a human is our feelings and perception of the world, and is what you perceive to be real any different than what is actually real? In a way, no. So I think that they prioritize that theme, but then you have to ask the logical question of, if the Tyrell Corporation wanted them to be robots and wanted them to be slaves, why on earth did they make them this way? Yeah. Why would you make them look exactly like humans
if you
in
have
every
the
way?
Ability to literally recreate a human and program it, why would you program anything that you don't want it to do? Like, why would you make it so good that it's like better than you, especially if you just wanted them as a slave force?
I feel like the movie never really touches on the reason for including artificial intelligence in the robots. Like, why do they, it never really says like, oh, they were designed to move, like you move a box from here to here, and then they evolved to experience love. And I mean, you don't even have to put artificial intelligence in something to move a box from here to here. Just tell it, move a box.
Yeah.
You know? And
right.
so I don't really, I guess I see what they're going for, which is like this bigger theme of the science fiction realm of like what makes life. These people are playing God. Is Terrell and Wallace creating them any different than, say, intelligent designer creator creating humans? Like, are we created? Are they human? That is like the questions the movie asks.
They're like, yeah, it seems like they're definitely living organisms, right? Like, there's no like, hey, I got to plug this into the back of their head to like update their system or change a rule or something.
Yeah. They bleed, they have sex, they love, they dream, they emote, like they get angry, they get sad. They're just humans. And while we're talking about the difference between them, let's talk about the void comp test, which is like in this world a test that they can use to discern whether something is a replicant or a human. And the test is like so advanced that you can't even tell what's going on in the first Blade Runner when they're doing it. It's like they're asking them questions, like measuring their pupillary response, like looking at their heartbeat, their blood pressure, all this stuff, I assume. But they
also don't explain that device very well.
I kind of like that they leave it open-ended. It's like the Force. Yeah. It's kind of better left unexplained. But it's based on the Turing test, which is a test designed by Alan Turing in the 1950s. It was originally called the Imitation Game, which there's a movie kind of about this. It doesn't really touch on the Turing test, but there's a movie based on Alan Turing with Benedict Cumberbatch. The Turing test is meant to discern if a machine has artificial intelligence. What you do is you have one human that you have two humans that you can't see and a judge trying to discern which one of them is getting their responses from a computer. So they'll ask them both a question, and if the judge can't tell which one of them is getting their responses to the questions from a computer, then that computer has passed the Turing test and has successfully imitated a human-like responses. A great movie for this, again, another recommendation, is Ex Machina, which is all about artificial intelligence and the Turing test and the complexities therein. But this inspiration is for the void comp test, which in a way feels like an inspiration for the entire plot of the Blade Runner movies. The Blade Runner series is actually based on a novel from 1968 called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. It's by Philip K. Dick. In that story, the main character, again, is named Rick Deckard, but unlike in the movie, he is simply retiring replicants in order to get money so he can save up to replace his android sheep with a real sheep. But along the way, he falls in love with one of these replicants and kind of learns about the blurred lines between being human and inhuman. So again, we like circle back from the beginning of that plot summary of the novel to the end, where the themes again connect with the movies and they just ignore the sheep. But I mean, do you think that there's a blurred nature between humanity? Like, do you think it's there's a strict line that you would draw in the sand for what makes something human?
In this movie or
in general?
In general, I mean, biologically, yes. But then, like, if something is alive and has consciousness, like that's a little bit different.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, for me, the question to you, less so biologically and more so like in an ethereal sense. What makes something, let's not say human, let's say alive?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think that's kind of like we said, like what they're exploring in this movie. And I think the replicants are definitely alive and living their own life, even if they are programmed. It doesn't seem like their program is very strong.
Yeah.
Maybe it is for a little bit, but then I don't know. In every case, we've seen that hasn't followed what it's supposed to do, right? Like, how many examples within the movie have we seen that they've actually been programmed to do what they were supposed to? Maybe just love? right?
Yeah, basically. But even she seems to have her own motivations. Like she seems to want to be the best.
Yeah.
Like she's still driven, I think, emotionally. That's where I kind of think I draw the line between man and machine, as less so in the line of creating your own original thoughts and more so on the line of emotion, because machines kind of think, and like your laptop kind of thinks, but it's just a simple if-then. If Arron presses this, then I do this. Now, branching out from that just to basically like a tree of options, I feel like is not that big of a leap, but actually feeling emotions is like way on the other end of the field. Feeling emotions is so complex, and even the simple
we don't even understand them as humans.
For real. We don't understand our own brains at all.
Yeah, we don't even know how to express our feelings at some points, let alone a machine being able to do that.
But the replicants in these stories all have that same struggle, the human struggle of they're struggling with their emotions and not knowing how to portray them or interpret them.
Exactly. All right, where do we go from here in this mystery?
Okay, so he retires Sapper, and then Kay finds an abnormality in the ground. It's this box that turns out to be the bones of Rachel from the first movie. Now, through the course of the investigation, they find out that evidence on this bone shows it was a replicant with a serial number on the bones, but also that it has shown signs of giving birth. So Kay follows that lead to the Wallace Corporation, where we meet Jared Leto's character, Neander Wallace, where we meet Love, this new, highly advanced Nexus model.
They're all new.
Everyone's new and better, yeah. You laughing at that. But he goes through their records. This movie has like some subtle hints of humor. When he's being led around by the guy who with no hair, he's like, we lost all my baby photos, and Kay's like, it's a shame. You must have been a beautiful baby. It's like that's hilarious. Yeah, it's just like a quick line. Too, yeah. But so he finds here a clue that when he takes it back and interprets the DNA at the LAPD office, that there was a male and female child born. It shows him here that the female child dies, which we know later to be a cover. He follows the male child's kind of records to lead him to Mr. Cotton, where it's at this industrial orphanage that we kind of talked about earlier. But in Mr. Cotton's records, the pages have been ripped out where he would have found details about this child. Maybe done by Freysa, who we meet later in the movies, trying to help hide the child, hide the records. Freysa's trying to lead the rebellion of the androids, so maybe that was done by her. But despite the fact that leads kind of a dead end, he follows his own memories to find this little wooden toy horse that was in...
Before we continue, why are the replicants having a problem overthrowing the humans? Like this rebellion. Like they're much stronger and arguably smarter.
I think the first movie says that there was an android rebellion like massacre, and so they only started putting them on the off-world colonies. So there's probably not a lot of androids on Earth. But then, you see quite a bit of them. Maybe that's changed since the Wallace Corporation. Now that Wallace has bought out Tyrell, maybe because he seems to be in love with the idea of creating an endless army of replicants. So maybe he's created more, and now there's more on Earth.
And he wants them to reproduce?
He wants them to reproduce. That's his and Love's end goal. Yeah. Because that's the fastest way he can think of to create. Wallace, I would say no.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think if you have a replicant creating replicants, then that kind of answers one of the
why can't questions. The replicants create a replicant anyways?
I think that would kind of...
If humans can.
I'm sure, because they say in the opening text crawl of the first movie that the replicants are at least as intelligent as their creators, if not more, I believe is what the opening text crawl says. So theoretically, they should be able to. But like the propensity of thought to be able to do it and then to like go and do it. There's like that scene in iRobot where he's like, robots creating robots. That's exactly what we need. And if they could do that, then yeah, hell yeah, they should be able to overtake the human race if they can just create more of themselves. And that's the same. It's kind of strange that Neander has kind of this bravado, I guess you'd say, that I think he definitely sees himself as God, because he creates life, toys with life. That super creepy scene where he creates that new model and then cuts her stomach open and then kisses her on the lips, and which I don't know why he does that. It's gross.
It was unnecessary.
It seems like maybe
and the fact that it was Jared Leto doing it too, just it made me uncomfortable, man.
I think that maybe the reason that he kissed her like that is because it's like a form of dominance to him.
Yeah.
And he treats them like playthings. He's like, I created you. I could do what I want with you. I could kill you. I can kiss you. And he does both in the one scene. So I think he kind of plays God. And I think that bravado is why he wants to unlock the secret to them replicating. Replicants replicating. Because he doesn't see a rebellion. He's like, I am God. What are you guys gonna rebel against me? I am your creator. Like, I think that's maybe why he doesn't see the flaw in his plan, because Joshi, the lieutenant, wants
what's his motivation to take over the world?
Well, I think his motivation is just to have this like ultimate workforce, like to have this. He says that there's a line in the movie where he says that all the greatest achievements in human history were built off of like a slave force. So I think he sees himself as like the ultimate human achiever. If he creates the ultimate slave force, he's like, we can accomplish anything. We can colonize all these off-world planets. We can create all these giant structures. We'll be unstoppable. So
I guess that's the part that I'm missing, is that like they didn't explain what his end goal is here, other than to make a replicant that reproduces. But like, why? Well, if he can make them himself.
He said it's the fastest way to produce like the force that he wants. Like I guess it's cheaper and faster that way, right?
Yeah.
Like he doesn't have to make them. If they're just like all go off, the way like
we just got to assume that he's like trying to take over the world, right?
I don't assume he's trying to take over the world. I assume it's based on like ego and accomplishment, I assume it's based on that God complex. Like he wants to be God. He wants to create life. I mean, creating life that can create life is more God. Like he's basically creating a machine. But if he creates something that can create life on its own, that brings him closer to being God.
Sure.
Oh, I feel like the ultimate way to review movies and films is just to draw everything back to biblical parallels.
Pretty much.
It's like, do I sound smart if I say that he wants to be God?
Yeah.
But I do think that that's genuinely what this movie is going for.
Okay.
And I think
it looks great.
I feel like now you're liking it less as we talk about it more.
Yeah, we should go back to like the creation of the actual movie and not the story.
But I think that definitely, I think Neander Wallace is an interesting character. I mean, they give you less, but you can draw still your own conclusions from it. Also, there's a bunch of other biblical parallels in the movie too. So Wallace calls love an angel. He talks about storming Eden in reference to the Garden of Eden. And when Love first approaches him, he says it's like something like it's not polite to enter the kingdom of heaven without a gift. So I definitely think that's a parallel that they're trying to draw.
Yeah, very on the nose.
He just wants to be godlike. I think that's his motivation for what he's doing. Yeah. But it's weird because if the Joshi recognizes the opposite perspective, she's trying to basically cover up this truth that androids can reproduce. She wants Kay to find the child and retire it, kill it, because she recognizes that she's on the ground level. She's not on high on this pillar that Neander's on. Joshi is, she's been a detective. She's a lieutenant in the LAPD. She recognizes that if replicants see their own propensity to reproduce, they're going to ask themselves the big question: what's the difference? And they're going to rise up and revolt and want to be more than slaves, because nobody wants to be a slave. And if they see that they can reproduce, this movie's drawing the line that the only difference between replicants and humans is replicants are created, and which humans in a way are created, but replicants are built, I guess I would say, rather than being created through procreation.
Built or grown? I don't really know how they make them.
Who knows? She just fell out of that sleeve. Yeah. But humans are grown too. I mean, she basically fell out of a
get it.
uterus with an
Yeah.
amniotic fluid all over her. Like she,
Yeah, it was
she was gooey. But I definitely think that we should move forward with the investigation that we've been going through very slow.
I agree. Let's move on. So he found this little horse thing. Kay found this little horse thing at the orphanage, and it's from his memory. So now he's like, oh no, like my memory is real. What does this mean?
So Joy actually suggests that he goes to the source of the memories, and that's when he goes to see Dr. Anastaline.
Yeah. And then they find out where that like wooden horse came from. And that leads him to Vegas.
Where he then meets Rick Deckard, which is Harrison Ford, like we said, reprising his role. At this point, Kay's kind of imagining that Deckard is his father because of the memory being real. Replicants aren't supposed to have memory. They're I think at one point they say they use memories that belong to other people, or they use fabricated memories, but he's not supposed to have memories of his own, which he's now been convinced that because he has his own memories, that means that he was the replicant who was born and dropped off at this orphanage. And he thinks he's discovering his own story, which would make Deckard his father. And then I really like this fight scene when he meets Deckard where Deckard's trying to kill him and Kay is just trying to he's like, I'm just here to talk, basically.
Yeah. Just taking blow after blow.
Yeah.
Just
that Elvis scene is great. The way that they use silence effectively, like cutting out when the hologram cuts out, and so much adds to the impact of the fight scene. But when things settle down, he has conversations with Deckard before Love catches up with him, and Love from the Wallace Corporation crashes in, takes Deckard. Seems like maybe mortally wounds Kay, but he lives. He gets the snot beat out of him though. But she leaves with Deckard because
this is when she killed Joy.
Oh my god. That hit me so hard the first time I watched. I was like, Joy's not really dead, is she?
Yeah.
No.
You don't have a backup memory card? Come on.
It's ironic the way that they got me connected to the machine, like loving Joy, similar to how like she's kind of supposed to be like this pleasure system for people. Like she's not supposed. I don't think she's intended to have the real romantic connection that Kay has with her. So they like made me fall in love with this piece of technology in the same way that Kay kind of wasn't supposed to.
Yeah.
But they leave. They take Deckard because Neander and Love are trying to find the answers from Deckard of how he was just part of creating a child, which that leads into another big question from this movie. Is Deckard a replicant or not? Now, the explanation I saw to my big question being that how is he a replicant when he's so weak and always getting smacked around by replicants? I looked it up and it says that Nexus 7 models, which would be the theory for what Deckard is, Nexus 7 models did not have that enhanced strength. And then you've got the evidence of Deckard having the dream or sharing the memory of the origami unicorn, which is something that like shared dreams should really only be had by replicants, because your original dream should be your own, but they're stockpiling these memories into replicants, so then they have shared dreams or memories. Now, do you think that this evidence leads to Deckard being a replicant? Do you think it doesn't? I will say that people are going to argue that it doesn't matter, and that's the whole point of it, but it's still fun to wonder.
It kind of matters, because then how was that baby made?
I think that it definitely matters to that question, because one is saying that the baby is half human, and one is saying that the baby is made between two replicants, which means two replicants can have a child.
Yeah. And if two replicants can have a child, why did it only happen in that one case? Because other replicants have had sex, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah. Well, Rachel was also a newer model of replicant when that happened.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely up to interpretation.
Neither movie answers the question fully.
No, definitely not.
But I don't know, which interpretation do you like better? Would you like it better if he was a replicant or a human?
I don't know. For whatever reason, I always just thought he was a human. So I don't know. Now you're kind of like messing up my whole world here.
But there's these hints, these small hints that he's a replicant, and both movies kind of touch on it they artfully dance around it without really answering the question. So go ahead and let us
Just
know.
like everything else.
Let us know what you think. Is Deckard a human? Is he a replicant? I mean, if he's a replicant, he's kind of a punk ass replicant because he's always getting smacked around.
For sure. Yeah. They don't show feats of strength very often.
I love when Kay goes through the wall.
Yeah.
When he's chasing after Deckard.
Was almost like unexpected because they show these feats of strength so infrequently that I was like, oh no, like he's falling behind, and it's like, oh snap, he just ran through the wall, like kind of caught me off guard a little bit of like, whoa, how did he do that? Oh, he's stronger. Got it. Do you remember the punch that Love did to the guy, the autopsy guy or whatever, like right behind his neck,
just
and like
took him out?
Oh, brutal.
So, yeah, that was, oh man,
brutal.
Guttural. And then she also, when she takes Joshy's hand and crushes the glass in it and squeezes it,
yeah,
I'm like,
through her hand,
writhing in my seat. Like everything in this movie, from like the color palette to the music to like the story and acting, just adds to unease. Like I feel like nervous on the edge of my seat. They should have hired you to do that sound effect. Did Hans call you?
Available.
Anyway, what was the last point we left off in our mystery? So he went to the source of the memories, and then he found
captured.
Yeah, so Love captured Deckard, and then Kay, he ends up with Freysa and the Robot Rebellion, and they kind of put the thought in his head of like, we can be more. Like we need you to save Deckard because we can't allow them to solve this mystery and take our lives from us and cement us as slaves in history. Like we can be more than slaves. And this is where like the emotions really breaking through for Kay, and like his feelings are shining forward that he doesn't want to accept this life. I mean, I think that
this is also where he realizes that he is not the son.
Yeah,
right?
She tells him that she says like a quick line that it was a girl, and he says, a girl? Yeah. She says, yes, the child was a girl, and that's where he realizes that it couldn't possibly have been him, which I think is kind of, again, it's like his psyche or his ego or whatever you want to call it has been shattered again and again with this realization that, oh, I'm the firstborn, oh, I'm not. Like, he's really going through it emotionally in this movie. Is it now or later that he realizes that Anna Stelline is the child?
I don't know if
I think they show a flashback to her crying about the memory. I think it's right in that scene with Freysa that he recognizes.
Yeah.
They show a flashback to her saying, like, this memory was lived. And he realizes, oh, it was her memory. Which then, as we as the audience are like, oh, crap. Dr. Anna Stelline is the firstborn. And I think that's part of why she has this kind of immune deficiency. Yeah, she's like the first of her kind. Not to mention she's living in a world that isn't exactly friendly to the immune system. I mean, this postmodern wasteland Earth in 2049 is like wrecked.
Which, if they can make replicants as... like, that's definitely the highest form of technology that we've like ever seen, right? They're making humans exactly like humans. Like, why can't they protect the Earth?
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
The Blade Runner universe has like this weird limitations on what they can do. It's like they can do all this incredible stuff, and then the things they can't do. Like you said, like there's no real presence of like there's not like a portable phone in any of this, is there? Like he has to sit in his car to talk with Joshy.
Yeah, maybe making replicants just
took up too much of their time.
Either that or it just produces like a mass amount of waste,
it's
that's
the reason why
destroying the atmosphere, because like the world's like already like, all right guys, we really need to like change our ways a little bit here, things aren't good, but like in that world, it's like way beyond. And it's like, man, like how is it to this point when you guys have the technology to literally make humans? Crazy.
I think that makes a lot of sense, that creating them adds to the atmosphere. I mean, the movie does also say that the reason for the off-world colonies is because of the pollution. Mm-hmm. So like that explains the off-world colonies that we've kind of touched on a little bit here and there. where do we leave off with our mystery? So he's this. We're just talking about the movie, guys.
We need to get back to, or we still need to get to the point where he goes and saves Decker.
Yeah,
that's
so
where we're at.
Freysa explained everything to him that we already discussed, and now he's kind of inspired in a way to go and take on this mission where he may not be like the savior, he may not be the firstborn child, the Christ figure of the movie, but he's the hero of the movie. He's the protector. So he goes on this journey, gets in his spinner, zips off to go save Deckard, and that scene is beautiful. It's so cool the way that they shoot it. I mean, talk about what makes a scene cinematic. Rain.
For sure.
But
and darkness.
And there's this giant seawall, which is called the Sepulveda seawall in the storyline. I think it's because of the environmental degrade in this postmodern world. The seawall probably exists because of rising sea levels protecting Los Angeles. But that is the location of our final fight scene. The plane crashes, and this is where we get to really see like a full display of the replicant abilities and like a fight between two enhanced individuals, and like it's awesome. It's super badass.
Really cool.
And there's like so much intensity to the scene. They utilize the lighting from the spinner to kind of light the scene with that
you
orange,
got the
and
the blue.
Yeah.
Orange and teal. Yeah.
And then there's the added intensity of like the ship being pulled away, the spinner being pulled away by the rising tide with Deckard still locked into it. So there's like this ticking clock aspect where he could drown, his life's on the line. There's so much intensity to that scene. So at this point, the mystery has finally been solved. Basically, Freysa had the answers the whole time. We just didn't know Freysa existed. And like the only thing left is for him to save Deckard, but standing in between him and Deckard is Love, who honestly is the real villain of this movie. She kind of like takes the spotlight from Neander Wallace. But isn't this scene so phenomenal? Like I feel like the climax of this movie is worth every slow bit.
Yeah, it looked really cool, and it was very intense. You know, like when she stab Kay?
Yes, like
and then
times.
Swam back out to the ship that Deckard's in as it's like flooding, and then Kay comes up like super fast out of the water and is like holding her up by her neck, choking her, but then he's like barely able to breathe above the water. Like that was a really cool scene.
So like intense.
Yeah.
But he's basically stopping them right from they have this method, I guess, that Neander hints at where they're going to force answers out of Deckard, whether it's like technology is going to go into his mind or whatever. What do you think about Love's motivation? Because the scene where Wallace guts that replicant, she kind of has that, what we're talking about with Ryan Gosling, where behind her eyes I feel like she's kind of disgusted in a way by this act that he's committing. I don't know if you felt this too, but I felt like she kind of had this grimace, like she was like, her jaw was clenched. And Wallace keeps he has these little cameras that are watching everything, these little floating devices. He keeps one point blank staring at Love's face, like he's trying to look for any sign of a reaction in her, and it doesn't leave until he finally walks away and the replicant drops dead. So I think he's kind of testing her with this moment. Where do you think her motivations are? What do you think she's feeling in the story?
Honestly, I don't know anyone's motivations in this movie, you know? Like, if he's trying to be God, then is she just trying to please him? You know, and be like the right-hand woman, you know, to God? Like, that's got to be really powerful to be that like second angel in line, you know?
I think you really touched on it well there, because he calls her an angel, and she clearly seems to think of herself as like the newest, best, most perfect model. So I think she wants to be perfect. She wants to be like the perfection that Wallace is looking for. I think she strives to like please her creator in that way. That's probably her main motivation throughout. I think you hit the nail on the head really well.
That's what it seems like anyways. Yeah.
But did you have, I mean, we've talked a lot about backseat directing, but do you want to encapsulate that real quick with what was good and bad as we come to a close?
I mean, obviously what was good was the cinematography, the lighting, the set design. And then what was confusing is what we've been talking about, just the little like questions that the two movies leave up to interpretation that maybe some of it could have been left up to interpretation, but then some of it I think would have added to the story if they just like told us,
Yeah.
you know, or showed us in some sort of way. Outside of that, like, I don't really have any other backseat directing notes, but it's weird that the world building is something that I feel is lacking, but the sets looked so in depth and cool. Like,
They built a cool world physically.
physical world was very developed and looked very unique, and like how they were talking about in like these behind the scenes clips that I was watching last night, like all of their outfits and stuff were made purely for function of surviving harsh environments, you know, like it all was like kind of stuck in the 80s style, and the whole purpose was just to survive, you know. So you had like very thick and bulky things, you know, like, and like we talked about, like all the analog stuff, like there was no screens or anything, like even what's the true kid's name that was making all the dreams?
Dr. Anna Stelline.
Yeah, so her little device was very like analog. It kind of looked like a camera lens almost, and that's what she's using to create
That thing was
these
so cool.
dreams. Yeah, but like typically in a sci-fi movie, it would probably be like a touch screen or like a hologram.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is a hologram, right? Where she's like, zoom, zoom, zoom.
Yeah, like, but we didn't see that. Like they stood true to like the world from the first film into the second, and then just kind of added to it. But even with that, it leads to questions of like, all right, they can literally make humans, they can literally make a snake or a dog, like they can do all these things, like, but all their other technology seems not as advanced, but it's kind of cool at the same time, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, what about you? Do you have any backseat directing for this movie?
The only con I would say to the movie is, like you said, maybe a little bit of additional clarity to kind of balance it out, and then some of the pacing where I feel like the movie could have been sped up in certain parts and definitely didn't need to be 2 hours and 44 minutes long. But I'll say a lot of good things about the movie. We've said again and again, visually stunning, the acting's great. I think the writing is very good, but it has room for improvement. It's kind of touching on our con.
In our professional opinion.
Yeah, you know, we've written better scripts.
Obviously.
But I think that I will definitely praise the movie for the questions that it asks, for the thought-provoking nature of the movie. That question of what makes something human. Ryan Gosling has a line in the movie that says, I've never killed something that was born before. To be born is to have a soul. And the movie is begging that question. Is that what makes something have a soul? Can a machine have a soul at a certain level of sophistication? Like, what gives humans our soul? What makes us different than a machine? These are some of the biggest questions in all of science fiction, and I think that some science fiction movies kind of gloss over it and are like, oh, cool, lasers. But this movie leans very heavily into the questions and themes, like biblical reflections, biblical themes, literary reflections and themes and questions, and it's a very, like I said, thought-provoking movie. So I like to just like think on these questions. Like, you could sit around a dinner table and have these conversations with people, like, what does it mean to be human? Can you be human without being born? Can a machine be sophisticated enough to
have a soul?
Like, does Sonny in iRobot have a soul? That's one of my favorite science fiction movies. And Sonny dreams. Sonny feels emotional connections. I would argue that Sonny has a soul. He doesn't have skin. He doesn't have blood. But what does that have to do with having a soul? So I think there are like very interesting questions.
Yeah, if anything, this movie has definitely sparked a very entertaining conversation. You know, like I really enjoyed
as a good
this
movie should.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this podcast. Like I said, like researching about this movie and talking about the movie and stuff has been like, it equals out the entertainment. Like, I'm having just as much fun with this movie than I would with like other movies that maybe I enjoyed the movie more for this other movie, but I'm enjoying talking about this movie a lot.
You know what I'm thinking as I look over at our Batman poster? Before we close, I want to talk about the ending of this movie and then some of the inspirations for this movie. So we could talk about this movie for so long.
This is a long podcast.
We could talk about this movie for a really long time.
I think we're at like an hour and 15 minutes or so right now.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, the inspiration, I think a big inspiration for this movie is 2001: A Space Odyssey, the sci-fi themes, the AI themes, and then visually. And then I think this movie, in some ways, definitely inspired the Batman through its lighting and use of, you know, darkness and its use of a specific color palette. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, they're very similar in that aspect where they have a style and they definitely embrace that style, you know, like it's in your face. It's not super subtle, but at the same time it definitely adds to the world building of the story, you know, and like just encapsulating you in to the environment that you're in. I think the Batman's like on the same level in terms of cinematography.
Both 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
So my final question to you then, a fitting place to end the episode is on the ending of the movie. So we haven't talked about it yet, but the very end of the movie, Kay brings Deckard to meet his daughter because he made that sacrifice. Like all these years, he made that sacrifice he talks about where he says, when you love somebody, sometimes you got to be a stranger. And it's not that he doesn't want to be in his daughter's life, but being in her life creates a danger to her. So he finally gets to meet his daughter, which is incredibly emotional. And they meet at the glass. Kay lays down on the stairs. Do you think Kay dies there?
I feel like he does not. More so just because of how other movies have kind of played out, you know, where humans have survived the injuries that he has and he's not a human. He's, I would say, physically above a human.
Oh, for sure.
And I think he did not die. But it's definitely a possibility that he could have, because maybe he just didn't get help in time, you know, like maybe no one knew that he was just laying there dead. But did he have his spinner at that time? Because maybe his little
drunk
robot drunk came and found him and was like, "Oh no, let me help you."
He did. He should have had the spinner because that's, I believe, how him and Deckard got there. But the reason I ask is because when I was reading kind of on the wiki for Blade Runner 2049, the ending of the movie description said that he lays down on the stairs, and dies. And I didn't really interpret it that way, so I was surprised to read it that way. I thought that was just kind of him, like, taking the world in, like taking he's been through a lot. I thought that was him, like, taking a breath and
like,
just,
I did something good.
Yeah, like kind of taking in the moment, like Thanos' garden moment, you know, taking in the accomplishment.
Yeah.
And like
he's been through a lot.
The decision
He's
that he
pretty
made.
tired.
Oh yeah, he's laying down,
just
man.
Taking a nap.
Let him rest. He doesn't have to die.
He doesn't die. Okay.
That was how I interpret it. Kind of similar to you. Is that I feel like he could probably live through worse.
What I thought was, because that's like the last shot that you see, right? Is the camera above him, and then it goes to the credits. And I thought, like, did he die? No, he didn't die. That's what I thought.
Like that was the speed of the
I had the question of like, did he die? And I was like, no, probably not. like he can't die, because if they're gonna make another movie, like, I want Ryan Gosling back.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want someone else to. Then the story gets even more jumbled. Like,
that's Kay right there, man. That's our guy.
That's right. All right. I think we should wrap up this episode. It's already a pretty long episode, which I like the longer episodes. I don't know about you.
I just like not restricting ourselves. I don't want to rush.
Exactly.
I mean, we talked about a lot. We talked about the themes. We talked about the plot, the mystery, the acting,
the cinematography,
the origins, the source code of the story, that beautiful tone, the music, the costuming. We hit all kinds of stuff. So
yeah, I think we did this movie justice. You know, like, I don't think we missed anything that we wanted to talk about, which is always a good feeling when we did
it praise. We bitched about it a little bit.
Exactly.
Got to get that in there.
Perfect. All right, so that wraps up this episode. We want to thank you guys for watching. We post new episodes every Monday and Thursday, every single week. We're on YouTube and Spotify for those full episodes, but then we also post a bunch of shorts on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram as well.
Yeah, we didn't do our usual middle of the episode thanking the audience and asking everyone to like and subscribe. So definitely thank you. And if you've made it this far, we did do it halfway, so if you made it this far,
we're giving out cash. Congratulations. Every listener gets $50. All you gotta do is send us a DM on Instagram and we'll get you your money.
Yeah, well, that's going to be coming in the mail on the 30th of February
2049. All right, Andrew, and
that's a wrap.